Namaste and good evening, everyone. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi. Extend my heartiest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. We are here for a special lecture on the rural question, issues in the rural transformation in India. The lecture is being delivered by Professor H.S. Shylendra and is being moderated by Professor Sunil Ray. This lecture is part of the series, The State of Development Discourses, #Cohesive Development, which is organized by Center for Human Dignity and Development at IMPRI and Center for Development Communication and Studies at Jaipur. I would now like to request Dr. Arjun Kumar, who is Director at IMPRI, to introduce our speakers and the moderator further. Sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ritika. And I welcome all of you for this very special lecture and this discussion on the state of development discourses, #cohesive development. It is such a pleasure. And this series we have started with the guidance and chairman and moderatorship of Professor Sunil Ray, who has written so much on this subject. And we are so fortunate today to start the series with a very important question, the rural question, issues in rural transformation in India. And the speaker for today is Professor H.S. Shylendra, who is Professor of Economics, Institute for Rural Management, Anand, Gujarat, IRMA, as also known as a very eminent and prestigious institution. And we are so much thankful to Professor Shylendra to have given us time to enlighten us on this topic. So let me briefly give a bio of Professor H.S. Shylendra. Sir holds a PhD in economics and is professor in the social science area at IRMA, Gujarat. He is also a member of the Center for Sustainable Livelihood and Center for Rural Urban Dynamics at IRMA. His area of interest in teaching and research include development theories, rural development, livelihood impact, gender, decentralization and local governance, and also microfinance. He has nearly 3 decades of experience combining research, training, teaching, and academic administration. Recently, he has been part of Impact Evaluation Series on National Rural Livelihood Mission, NRLM, Narmada Canal Irrigation, and Training Impact of NIRD, National Institute of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj. He has participated in several research and consulting assignments for central and state governments, donor agencies, various civil society organizations, NGOs, various government-related institutions like Reserve Bank of India, NABARD, and various institutions related to rural development. Dr. Shylendra was also chairman of the Standing Working Group on Local Institutions of the Chhattisgarh Planning Commission from 2016 to 17. He was also a member of expert committee of RBI on credit cooperatives in 2012. He was also a member of task force on credit related issues of farmers of the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India, that was in 2009, member of working group of Insolvency Board of India 2018. Dr. Shylendra was also awarded the Dr. S.R. Sen Prize by Indian Society of Agricultural Economics for Best Book on Agricultural Economics and Rural Development for his work, Diversification and Sustainable Rural Livelihood, and which came in 2012. He was also a visiting lecturer at PG course on developing countries of Swiss Federal Institute of Technology at Zurich in 1999. And it's very less to say that sir has various books, monographs, articles, journal, magazines, articles to his credit on these areas of his interest, which is also the leading topics in this subject. And currently, he's also pursuing a study on dynamics of rural transformation in post-reform period in Gujarat, based on an intemporal village level analysis. And through this plethora of his experience, we look so much forward to learning more on the lecture and presentation sir is about to give, followed by a very good discussion. So let me also introduce our participants for today. For a chair and moderator, we have Professor Sunil Ray. And for discussants, we have Dr. Papia, who is Associate Professor at Humanities and Social Sciences Department in Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Patna. We have Dr. Anamika, Priya, Darshini ma'am, who is lead at research and at Sakshamaa initiatives for what works at C3, Center for Catalyzing Change. It's a very premier NGO based in Delhi. We are also joined by Dr. Upender Singh, who is the Director of Center for Development Communication Studies, CDECS, which is also a co-organizer. So we'll also have Search Insight, and it's also a practice organization. So, and in this series, we are also focusing that theory also meets the practice. So it's a very important dimension, and we look forward to learning from all of you. So without any further ado, let me invite Professor Sunil Ray to give his opening remarks, and then to introduce Professor Shylendra to give his lecture. Professor Sunil Ray, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Arjun. Let me very briefly share with you my understanding about this forum and how important this forum is all about. It's something which is very important just because the fact that it makes a difference between this and the rest of the forum that you have been going through, you have been participating. Why it is so? Because Dr. Arjun has really has come up with a fascinating idea. I would say is a very proactive, innovative idea. And that idea is something which is very scarce today. The kind amount of experience that I have working with varieties of people all over the world and India, and everything together after a long time, I could say this is something, a unique attempt being made, only to say, to search for something which is alternative to the kind of the existing body of knowledge that you have. Now, there are two aspects of it. One is that he emphasizes in his background note, which is very important, demystification. Now, there are hundreds of theories, hundreds of ideas floating around. Majority of them are confusing, repetitive, and very hardly you find something which is very important and real life situation connection. How do you pull on this one? You want to develop your career? Go on reproducing it. Your boss is something who has been developing his career by reproducing it. He will like you, and immediately he'll promote you. So it's nothing but promoting the mediocrity all over. The moment you show your innovativeness, your boss will not like. Boss feel threatened. Boss means the system. And the system will completely suppress you, but nothing doing. Idea is the idea. Innovation is innovation. And that is something which is very important. We need to add it to. You must be having some exposure to Thomas Kuhn's Scientific Revolution, the book that he had written in 1962. I still remember, I read number of two times I read, and again I'm reading that book. I remember two things. Very briefly speaking, he talks about normal science, and the normal science is always have a paradigm. Every normal science has a paradigm. And what do they do normal science? You see the researchers, all of us like us, all of us, we see what are the difference between the paradigm, what the paradigm talks about, and what is the research, what is the practical situation talks about. So once you find an anomaly between the two, immediately we'll jump into the solution. Well, this is how it has to be resolved. And we stop at that. So it goes on and on. So that is why it is nothing but status quo maintenance of the normal science. Now, what happens, the paradoxical problem is that, or rather, I would say that evolutionary process that talks about when the anomalies accumulate over a period of time, when the anomalies accumulate over a period of time, anomalies between what the paradox wants to gain and what is actually gained, this anomaly, when that goes on, despite the fact that we're rectifying it, but it goes on accumulating, then some researchers come out. Kuhn says some researchers come out and they look for a change of the paradigm. And then resolution of the problem or the conflict that really that had been there will be solved, will be achieved. And then new paradigm will emerge. The question today is, and if you really even Zizek's work, Zizek says that in his one of his fascinating book that he writes, that book is that this sublime object of the ideology, Zizek. He writes that this is Ptolemization. You go on, rectifying one point here, that point there, but all within the same box, jumping from one place to another. oh, solution is available in that corner, you go there and again come back here. But finally, if you see at the end of the day, where are you staying? You are in the same box, being trapped by. You're not getting out of the box. Today, not only in India, throughout the social science research, everywhere you find that you are being trapped. We are not able to come out with the solution. Now, a group, that is what Arjun has thought about, is a kind of a group people, a group researcher, bright scholars in India to be together to see, no matter which school of thought you belong to, you are a Marxist, come on. You are a neoclassical economist, come on. You are a monetary economist, come on. You are somebody, come on, no problem. But come out with something innovative. Come out something very challenging. Come out with something that challenges the existing thought process. Is it possible for you to do? It is possible. All that being taught that, well, we cannot do it. Somebody has to do it, and we'll have to do it. It's nothing but falling victim of the cultural or educational imperialism. Somebody is there to do for you to do research, and then you come out with a solution where you try to find out as a guinea pig whether the research being conducted outside India is to be experimented over here in Indian population, and see that India or third world countries population, see that validity of that kind of a what is called research of the theoretical paradigm. Rubbish. We must say nonsense. We must throw it off and really think something. It is necessary for us to challenge ourselves. Survival in academics or survival in research is certainly important. I understand the surroundings everywhere, but maybe the kind of attempt which Dr. Arjun is trying to make in this institute, by creating this kind of forum, bringing some bright scholars like you all, not only that this series has begun, and then there will be many people, I have been informed, many scholars all over the world are joining it. Many scholars, there's a queue now. Many scholars, I feel so happy. So the eagerness of the people to really contribute something very different, at least being critical of it. And after being critical, not constructive criticism, it is something like a ridiculous way of looking at the things. Nothing constructive criticism. It's a criticism, hard-hitting criticism. Throw it off and really try to find out something very original. If this possible, this is what exactly I could see his forum is really coming out with it. And this could be of help, great help to the policymakers. It will be great help to the people who really want to construct something. It will be great help for the people of the country, majority of the people of the country. Now, it is precisely where this forum stands, and I do not want to expand further, but this is how I look at it, and I feel myself very much involved because of this kind of exercise that he has undertaken. It's something which is very fruitful, very challenging, very innovative, and I'm pretty sure with the number of people getting involved, and quality people, the people who makes a difference. It's not that everybody is being entertained. He has made it very clear. So that way it will be too good for us, and it's very good that Professor Shylendra, who is a very good friend of mine and fantastic writer, is very, very provocative and has a very, very investigative mind he has got, and highly pro people, and trying to understand and have the ability to abstract, have the ability to understand and generate a law. The point is that today, what kind of discovery that you want to make? What kind of discovery? Want to discover the same thing which you wanted to discover? It is nothing no normal science. Nothing. No. You discover which is not discovered at all. Simple law. It is precisely where I'm looking forward to Professor Shailendra's first presentation. I'm so happy Dr. Arjun has chosen this, on a very good topic on the rural question. And Dr. Shylendra, no less than Dr. Shylendra, who is competent enough to speak something on this one, because I'm familiar with this word, and it will be too good for us to get enlightened and also at the same time. But finally, after having done everything, my question always remains same. Tell me, please, what is that you are trying to add up? What is that trying to add up? Are you trying to add up something very new, claim to have something new? If not today, but tomorrow, there's a potential of this kind. That indication has to be there. I think that really essence of this forum could be really seen in the light of what is that we have been able to really find out something very new. And that is when we add up, and finally, Professor Dr. Arjun has got a lot of plans to do, because this is the series will continue for quite some time. And large number of people from abroad, they have responded to his one request, and they're going to join. So it will be too good, and I'm very happy Dr. Shylendra is going to start with his very few words, and I request Dr. Shylendra to make his presentation.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Arjun, first one clarification on the timing. How much time I can have for my...
So please take half an hour or so.
Half an hour.
Yes, as we spoke, sir. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thankful. Of course, as a teacher, we are used to taking 90 minutes of class. I know that this is seminar. I need to compromise. Okay. Anyway, without wasting much time, let me begin. Yeah, my thanks to Dr. Arjun and team for this invitation. And I'm privileged that Professor Ray is moderating this seminar. Of course, Professor Ray was senior to us as a PhD scholar. When we had joined ISEC, people used to talk about him. Of course, though we could not get an opportunity to meet him, but luckily in the recent past, I have been able to have interaction with him. I also heard his talk on his own book that he has written, a very scholarly book. I was very impressed by that. So really happy and privileged that he's chairing this session. Right, and of course I'm inspired by the words that he has said, right? What difference that we can make, that is more important, right? In fact, I must say our institution, Institute of Rural Management, in fact, Dr. Kurian, many of you I'm sure aware of Dr. Kurian, right? Who is known as the father of White Revolution and all, right? And he played his own role in scaling up this Amul cooperative model, right, particularly in the dairy sector. And he had the goal of also replicating that same model in other sectors, but there were constraints. But Amul model remains as a model for replication, given its success. Of course, though it has limitations, success, replication in other sectors of our agricultural economy, but also even in other fields. So therefore, this rural management concept that Dr. Kurian conceived of, his main idea was that, of course, he was totally dissatisfied with all these mainstream institutions, particularly management institutions. So though he had made a request for them to help him in the implementation of Operation Flood, so they did not come forward. So that made him start this institution, train professionals who will work in the rural sector, who will work for the farmers, and work with an empathy and appreciation of their conditions and need, and contribute for their well-being. So that's how IRMA has come up. And that is our orientation. So in whatever we do, our teaching, training, research, right? That's briefly about IRMA. And of course, about this forum, I agree with what Dr. Ray has mentioned as to what this forum stands for. And my own view is that, yes, we are here trying to reflect on some of the very basic issues, very fundamental issues, and that too in this period, right, COVID period, where things have, all over, right? They've been, in some sense, sort of disturbed, and there are a lot of concerns and worries. But this is the time to reflect on even on basic issues, right? Because what we see as the impact of COVID, right, be it on the society, be it on economy, etc., is in some sense reflection of what prevailed earlier. It's only aggravated the basic problems and the paradoxes or challenges that existed. So therefore, when we are having a discussion on some of these basic questions in this COVID period, it basically therefore reflection of those with the kind of lessons that COVID has given us, reflect even better and possibly come up with alternative views, which Dr. Ray was mentioning. Yeah, so those are some of my just sort of remarks which I thought I should make in this forum. It's important and we should all understand therefore the context better, right? And of course, my abstract and my topic possibly may have raised some expectations. I'm not sure how far I'm going to stand up to that, and particularly the remarks with the kind of remarks Professor Ray also has made. So when Dr. Arjun approached me for this talk, I was not sure, but I read the abstract, what he had circulated. So, and these days I was pursuing a study which Dr. Arjun mentioned about dynamics of rural transformation in post-reforms Gujarat. It's a kind of an intertemporal study. I had studied 3 villages in the 1990s. So I have gone back to those villages and trying to compare them. Right, that study still is ongoing. So I'm not going to present findings from that study, though I may mention here and there. But I had done some bit of a review of literature and some secondary analysis. So given that, I immediately, spontaneously, I thought of this topic because that's what was going on in my mind in the recent period. So I thought I'll suggest more to challenge myself rather than to contribute. So if there are therefore lack of, please excuse me. Let me therefore at the outset say this. Right. Yeah. So yes. Next slide, please. So let me start with this this thing which we are all familiar. What happened last year in the context of COVID, particularly post lockdown, the reverse migration that happened. Right. Right, and we all know it was a kind of it's a tragedy that happened, right? Such a humongous kind of reverse outflow that happened, and many people died, and heart-rending scenes that we all witnessed, right? So I want to posit this in the context of what Niti Aayog had said in its 3-year developmental action plan, right? So which is some kind of a new plan document, right? So in page number 60 on chapter on rural transformation, right? Niti Aayog says this: the rural landscape has been transforming with clear distinction between rural and urban areas disappearing. And this has resulted in a more integrated economy. This is what it says. Of course, though it contradicts in some way subsequently, but this is the statement, right? So anyone who reads this, and particularly what we witnessed last year in terms of this rural reverse migration, it's such a false narration of blurred rural-urban boundaries, right? It's devoid of any kind of understanding of what kind of linkage that is there. Definitely there is a huge level of migration is there, rural-urban migration is there, but to say that it is such an integrated kind of a linkage and that rural-urban distinctions have disappeared, to say that it's of a very high level of, of course, not only the Niti Aayog was claiming for itself some kind of a credit for what they have done, but it's a specious argument. Yes, so therefore the COVID-19 induced reverse migration, so therefore has exposed not only this kind of a narration, but it has also exposed the basic fault lines that still lie there in the rural transformation which Niti Aayog or the government of India claims about, right? So this is what struck me when I was reading this Niti Aayog's document and this event of reverse migration. I thought I will start with this. So therefore, this idea of blurred rural-urban boundaries, it's a totally false narration. So the dichotomies still exist. No doubt there are changes that have taken place, right? But this kind of analysis that it's totally integrated. If it would have been integrated, this, even if COVID would have been there, this kind of migration would not have taken place. It's clearly telling about the kind of the weak link that is there in this linkage process, and it was also highlighting the fact that rural remains as a kind of still as a sink for these people to go back. Of course, we know much of this migration is cyclical in nature, and the crisis of this nature makes rural become a bigger sink. So that's how possibly we could analyze this thing. But we need to understand this reverse migration even better. I'm also attempting a study on this reverse migration, though some preliminary studies have come about. Yeah. So next slide, please. Yeah. So given this, so let me depict some statistics, right? So of course, these are all some stylized standard statistics to highlight the fact that the rural realities still persist. It's not a kind of a phenomenon that Niti Aayog presents, that it is an integrated rural-urban economy that is prevailing, right? Of course, be it in terms of the size, population size, the extent of rural workforce that is involved in agriculture, right? Of course, cultivators, though the number has increased, there is some amount of depeasantization that is happening. But important thing going by the last census is that the number of agricultural laborers has increased significantly. Yeah, the issue of proletarianization, right? It's becoming more acute. And at the same time, in terms of the peasants, we know that fragmentation is leading to these holdings becoming smaller and smaller, with the average size being 0.6 for the small and marginal holders who constitute about 86% of the total number of holdings, though with only about 47% of the land holding. So that's also telling the kind of dichotomy that is there. And another kind of dichotomy is the GDP share of agriculture and elite sector. So average has been 15.23%. These are all as per the government sources, right? As that's what I said, basic stylized facts. And that is indicating the squeeze that is there in the rural sector, right? Much of the India's population, right, working population, depending on agriculture, but has to depend on only a small share of income, overall income. And that has also not been helped by the low growth rates in agriculture, right? Though post-reforms, manufacturing and service sectors have been showing some higher growth rates, but agriculture has largely remained at 3%, 4% kind of a thing. Luckily, of course, during the COVID period, it was only agriculture which showed positive growth rates. And given this squeeze, so we can see the kind of average incomes that is there. Of course, this is what I could collect the latest kind of incomes. For 2011 and 12, and it may not be too different even if you adjust for prices, right? So there is a huge difference. The major point is that huge difference between the agricultural worker and the non-agricultural worker, right? So people like us, right? So the average income, so huge income disparities, right? So therefore there is this squeeze, right? Also compounded by policy-related problems led by neoliberalism. Agriculture has been in a kind of a crisis, and farmer suicides, right? Which we have been sort of familiar with for the last 2 decades, is emblematic of this kind of a crisis, right? Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, of course, this has forced people to migrate, diversify, right? So, and wage and salaried employment, of course, which is this is a kind of non-farm employment. Much of it is in the form of migration, cyclical migration, constitute a very significant chunk, right? So, the squeeze that has happened, so therefore, is forcing them to look for this kind of diverse kind of income source. And which is also making them be at the mercy of the urban and the industrial sectors which exploit them. And of course, given the size, therefore there is a considerable surplus labor, supply of labor, leading to informalization and casualization. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, this is also in some way reflected in the study that I am doing. Of course, I am just showing only data for the recent data, though I am doing a comparative analysis for last 25 years, just to highlight this fact at the micro level. So this is data for one tribal and one non-tribal village in Gujarat. So we can we can very clearly see the same kind of trends, right? Though agriculture continues to be a primary or major occupation, but given the squeeze, so migration has become an important source, more so in tribal areas, right? And migration also contributes very significant proportion of income, both in tribal and non-tribal village. And as I said, yes, much of this migration here also, what I have observed is also of a highly distressed kind and cyclical in nature. And the impact of COVID was this. I was again tracing these farmers. They lost much of this migration income post-COVID, right? 68% in tribal village, 38% in non-tribal village. So literally, when there was such a lockdown for such a long period and all activities got stagnated, so these migrants lost out on their employment and income, right? Yeah, that's just only one slide from my study, but I want to just come back to this again, the larger question. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah, what does this mean? That this persisting right rural crisis, agrarian crisis, in the overall sense means that on the developmental front, right? So particularly the rural sector continues to suffer. There are variety of deprivations, right? Of course, again, I have compiled these from government sources, right? So we can very clearly see the growing rural-urban disparities on all major parameters of basic development and living standards, right? Living standards. So apart from this rural-urban disparities, right? One thing, though there are certain changes that are happening, but if one were to look at rural in terms of really the depth of these achievements, depth of these parameters, one can possibly find even much bigger gap, right? So you can see one parameter here which I want to show, the households with internet facility, right? So there's a huge gap. So now in post-COVID, we know what happened to all this online education, mobile education. Literally rural could not benefit except small percentage here and there, right? So literally rural lost out on this online based education. Already rural education scenario was bad, but now COVID and with online kind of an education, rural has suffered enormously in the education field. Of course, even in other fields, and like as I said, the kind of income that they lost out, income and employment that they lost out on the migration front. Yeah, apart from this rural-urban disparities, so we also have to take note of the fact that, so if you were to look at this by say social categories, like I have just given for illustration, a poverty ratio by SC/ST. So we can very clearly say that there is a huge disparity between the SC/ST group and the other groups, right? So SC/ST groups who have various disadvantages. So therefore, even in terms of the developmental parameters, we can see considerable kind of a gap there in their achievements. And another kind of disparity is also male-female disparities. Just for illustration, again, I have given, though literacy rate is higher, but if one were to look at by male-female disparities, again, so we can clearly see the divide. These differences that we are seeing, they become much acute if we take this intersectionality of social groups or even by gender, right? Yeah, so next slide, please. Yeah, so therefore, overall, what I wanted to highlight by these facts is that despite the developmental efforts of over 70 years, rural in that sense is not withering away significantly in any sooner. It's going to remain, and these disparities are going to remain. The dichotomies are going to remain, unlike what Niti Aayog was sort of depicting, that there is a total integration between rural and urban. The disparities have sort of have disappeared. No, that is not the case. Even if we read even these data as depicted by the official sources. So in that sense, in the rural transformation, there is a kind of an impasse there, right? And so many of these rural structures and problems continue to prevail. And the transformation that has been expected, either in the Lewisian kind of structural transformation, which all governments are trying to attempt, shift the labor, trying to shift the labor. Even Niti Aayog says, so one of their main objective is shift the labor, do skill development, shift the labor. Neither that is happening, nor of course what is visualized under the Marxian kind of a framework, the typical classical Marxian framework of agrarian question. So where there is subsumption by capitalist mode of the surplus peasants and the labor class, nor the social equality that has been visualized by Ambedkar, right, has materialized despite the constitutionalism, right? I will come to that. Yes, so therefore what we see, though of course those statistics were giving indication, but this is this prevailing rural problem or rural challenge is a highly complex thing, right? Of course, though the governments have been trying to address it through this simple Lewisian neoclassical kind of a thing, that we can possibly shift, we can have liberalization, we can have skill development, etc. No, it's much more complex. It is not lending itself for such an easy solution, right? So yeah, so and therefore, though in the Marxian literature, agrarian question framework is seen as one which can possibly help understand this transition, why it is happening or not happening in a better way. But even in my view, that is not adequate given our complexity. Complexity like India or even other developing countries. So we may need a broader framework. So what I have just attempted here is to broaden this. Of course, I'm trying to build over the agrarian question framework, and I am calling this analytical framework, which I am using as rural question. Of course, though agrarian question can capture the broader rural issues, but unless we explicate that in our context, right, particularly like, for example, caste issue, right, unless we explicate that, right, so merely posing it as an agrarian question a challenge and needs to be resolved in that typical Marxian way, though Marx had identified multiple ways, is not going to help us. Therefore, I have slightly, the scholars have argued that agrarian question, though it has challenges, it is a useful analytical framework, but it may need to be contextualized or even broadened. So therefore, I have tried to slightly contextualize it and broaden it, and which I will explicate further. Right. So therefore, I call this framework as analytical framework as rural question, right? And for me, this rural question, as I have highlighted in terms of some data, secondary data, and also some limited primary data, as a challenge of double deficit, I would call that. Right? One is the developmental deficit, which is much more to do with the livelihood, right? Distress. Unless I migrate today, I cannot survive, right? So, or even some of the basic things, right? Maybe health, maybe water. So even those kinds of things, they are all the developmental questions, developmental issues. So I'm calling this as the developmental deficit. Why this problem persists? One is there is deficit on the developmental front, and second is the transformational deficit, that is one of attaining the socio-economic change as visualized under policy or under these theories. Next slide, please. Right. Yeah, let me explicate further this this analytical framework. Yeah. So when I say that there is a developmental deficit, so yeah, so as I've shown some data also, there is persistence of considerable poverty and deprivation. Of course, it is more acute also when we go by the social groups also, right? Yeah, so the developmental interventions that have been made in the last 70 years, variety of them, we know of them. I myself have studied a large number of them, including, of course, the NRLM, the recent or the flagship program about which I recently wrote a paper also, which I can share, right? So given their nature, they have made only limited impact, right? So why? I would say that, yeah, though there are a number of programs, plethora of programs, but the priority that they give for rural development and the allocation that they make, even if you look at the planned allocation for rural and agriculture sector, it has never crossed 20%. It has never crossed 20%, right? And more than that, these programs, though they undergo a lot of changes, names, strategies, etc., they largely remain reformist, And neoliberalism has further compounded the problem, right? Neoliberalism in terms of expenditure, depression, and a variety of other things that it brings with it, right? And that is also not helping. And in terms of course, being at IRMA, so we look at the rural management problem, right? The management of these interventions, their implementation, right, including of course mobilization of people, etc. So they are lackadaisical, and they are devoid of an integrated approach to make any significant impact. Like Amul, for that matter, though Amul is a limited example, Amul has an integrated approach, so it is in a better position to create much better impact as an intervention than some of these run-of-the-mill programs. Yeah, so therefore, poverty, deprivation, inequality, poor living standards continue to afflict a significant proportion of a rural population, most of the weaker section, leading to the rural-urban gaps that we have seen. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the developmental deficit that I have proposed as part of this rural question. Next is, yeah, so the transformational deficit. Yeah, so many social and economic structures, right, which are traditional, which are pre-capitalist, right, in nature, so which are inimical to progress, continue to persist and hinder transformation, right? So it could be, right, it could be even caste system, it could be bondage, it could be gender inequalities, and such kinds of structures that they prevail, right? So this transformation, right, the socio-economic transformation in these structures, as visualized under at least four theory or policy frameworks, four different policy frameworks, also has not materialized, right? So therefore, this transformation deficit, to me, can be seen at least in four. It can be possibly expanded, right? As I said, that I am trying to broaden this agrarian question. So I have looked at four possible areas of transformation where this deficit persists, right? One, of course, is this Lewisian structural transformation of resolving the dichotomy between the traditional and the modern sectors to absorb the surplus labor. This is, of course, well known, and this is the strategy, right? All our official documents. So all of them, even now also, whether it is the 3-year action plan or any official currently, the major argument is that we'll shift the labor, right? So that this dichotomy is ended. But how they will do, what is the strategy, there is no explication, right? So therefore, this in some sense, it's much more, it's rhetorical, right? So therefore, in actual practice, right, shifting of this labor is some kind of a naive argument. It's not that easy, right? Though it looks potential, right? It has certain, right, apparently has it may have worked in the certain other countries, Western countries, particularly during colonial period, etc. But it's not workable in the current context, especially context like developing countries like India, right? Also given the fact that industrialization is highly inadequate to absorb a large chunk of labor, which is one of the major requirements. And neoliberalism further has added to this. So therefore, there is jobless growth. There is literally negative growth rate in formal employment, right, over the years. In the recent past, if you see formal employment, there is negative growth rate. It's a jobless growth that is happening. So therefore, this structural transformation, which is commonly visualized in the policy documents, has not materialized and is not going to materialize under this jobless growth scenario. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so another kind of framework to look at transformation, of course, is the agrarian question framework by the Marxian scholars, right? Of course, Marx himself looked at the transformation process in the context of UK, which is seen as a classical case, right? It's basically visualizes transition of pre-capitalist formations into capitalist mode, absorbing peasantry and labor, and through particularly the process of primitive accumulation, right? Yeah, so though Marx analyzed this in the context of UK as a case, but Marx did not prescribe or project that this would be the case all over. In fact, he visualized multiple ways of change. Right? Yeah. So therefore, people have, but somehow focused on this typical classical Marxian framework, agrarian question framework, to look at various kinds of transformation in the developed countries and also in the developing countries. So in the context of course, India, so people have applied this and try to look at, of course, what it reveals. Of course, though capitalism had made inroads in varying degree in agriculture, but it has lacked dynamism for any kind of a radical shift, right? Including, of course, the farm bills, which were an effort to deepen the markets, right? So, and the farmers' agitation that we have seen. So, government somehow was trying to give more scope for markets, right? Yeah, but despite those kinds of efforts and liberalization, etc., but overall, the assessments that have been made, my review, right, and also several people have reviewed this framework. What it tells that agrarian question, right, in terms of resolution by way of capitalism, given the kind of experience, given the kind of challenges the developing countries have got, is incapable of addressing the present question. And now some even argue that possibly agrarian question has been rendered irrelevant or incapable of resolving the present question, especially under globalization. People say there is now no longer the agrarian question of capital, particularly in relation to peasants. Possibly there is agrarian question, Bernstein, etc., argue agrarian question of labor. Possibly one may frame it in that way and then look at this. But many do not agree, particularly given the worsening agrarian situation, the livelihood crisis, etc., and also the growing informalization and casualization of labor. People see this as a major challenge, major crisis, which countries like India are unable to resolve. Yeah, so but it needs to be resolved. So therefore, the agrarian question as an analytical framework is useful and needs to be critically, right, applied and probably understood. But some argue possibly we may need to broaden this. That's what I was telling, or contextualize this, right? So some therefore are saying that since the present question is not getting resolved as per the agrarian question, right? So what is being argued is one way forward in terms of, again, policy suggestion is revival of peasantry and family forms. Even multilateral agency like FAO, they are all emphasizing. Some of the scholars are also emphasizing that it is better to revive peasantry, right, in developing countries. So some say this is of the Chayanovian kind of an argument, where Chayanov had suggested that peasantry could survive, right, and become a self-sustaining kind of a group. So some therefore are arguing of reviving the peasantry instead of putting peasants in this kind of a crisis, right? Yeah, next slide, please. Right. Yeah. So I'll just quickly sort of go over. Of course, then the third one I have added to this transformational deficit is the social equality, which Ambedkar has visualized in terms of annihilating the historical caste system, right, which is necessary for equality. And because caste comes as a vicious inimical kind of a structure, right, in terms of attaining the required socio-economic change. And of course, Ambedkar visualized various ways by which this caste system could be overcome, because Ambedkarite sees caste as one of the major stumbling blocks in progress in Indian context, right? So he had therefore visualized, of course, destroying a thing. Some said it does not matter, at least some, even if it is idealism or utopian, it has to be visualized, and also intermingling of social groups, right? And then, of course, constitutionalism in terms of rights, right, fundamental rights, and various other kinds of measures that we have adopted, right, is one way forward. But all of them have their own limitations. Even constitutionalism has not worked to help overcome the caste system, though caste relations have weaken but continue to assert itself, create segregation, and which is also reflected in some of the developmental indicators which we have seen. Of course, if you were to see exclusively by caste, this becomes even more clear. This rural question, rural challenge becomes even very clear by social groups. So therefore, this transformational question or deficit is another angle which we need to fast, right? High time they integrate, they identify, they recognize this and integrate this, right? Integrate this in the analysis and also integrate in the mobilization and policy efforts. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So, and then the fourth eye which I have identified is the rural governance framework and the deficit in it, right? So the 73rd constitutional amendment has visualized local governments with participation of women and weaker section, right? Of course, those some say it is on the lines of the Gandhian Gram Swaraj, and it has the scope, right? It has the scope, at least theoretically, to make panchayats become instruments of grassroots planning and development to revive the rural economy, right? If possibly, if it is implemented. But all the possible assessments done so far, I have also done for Government of India 2 major assessments, and recently I also wrote a paper in EPW, right? The relationship between democratic decentralization and economic reforms, where economic reforms have trumped over democratic decentralization. And my argument is that, so there is weak devolution under neoliberalism. Panchayats have been disempowered. So this this transformation that was visualized in terms of rural governance and empowerment of the local institutions and the population and the local people, that also has not been enabled or facilitated. So the opportunity for participatory development and rural revival via this instruments of local governance, including participation of women and weaker section, though it is working in the sense of electoral mechanisms, but in the real sense of empowered institution, that opportunity we have lost, and we need to move forward. Yeah. So yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So therefore, I conclude by saying that rural question remains important both in terms of the developmental and transformational challenge. Rural question, as I have highlighted, may remain unresolved in decades to come. COVID will only aggravate further. The impasse, of course, is the result of multiple deficits under the prevailing developmental paradigm. Neither the welfarist governmentality, of course, all the interventions, welfarist interventions, nor the trickle down of capitalist growth process has been able to resolve the rural question. So the way forward, of course, given the complexity and intersectionality, is challenging. Pending the long-term revolution or transformation of the socialist or the capitalist approach. And that approach consists of, next slide please, right? These five or six initiatives or policy directions. One, of course, I see land reforms and collectivization of peasants, especially coming from Anand, where Amul model as a collectivist model had played a significant role. I argue for this. Then I argue for the revival of the panchayats, right, towards in a true democratic way. Certain minimum constitutional devolution has to be made. To empower them, right, addressed head on, right? So we have expected growth and some legal measures to address, but inequality needs to be addressed more proactively, right? Whether it is the caste-based or even gender inequalities, more proactively. Like, for example, if we are doing land reforms, I would say land reforms, do it in favor of women, like that, or in favor of, again, the landless, the scheduled castes, right? And of course, neoliberalism has come in the way of public investment. So we must reverse this, right? So there is declining public investment in agricultural development, poverty eradication, and improving quality, this thing. So through right-based approach, we must, on a priority basis, at least give this. This is the minimum that we can give, right? This is the minimum that a society based on welfareism, social justice can give, right? pending all other transformations, right? And a more planned approach, of course, on the structural issues needs to be addressed. A more planned approach for growth of non-farm sector of labor-intensive kind, and of course that is linked to the globalized world. So therefore, at that level, I would argue developing countries need to adopt more autonomous development, extricating themselves from the compulsions of global capital and neoliberalism. Yeah, yeah. So that's my point. I close here. Thank you very much. Sorry, I took more time than allotted, Arjun. So as I said, we as teachers are used to giving lectures, one-way lectures. So and that happened partly here also. Yeah. Thank you all for your patient listening. And as I said that I have not done any research per se on this. This is based on some review I had done for another work. So therefore, I also would like to learn or even be challenged on these ideas. So therefore, I look forward to comments of the panelists and the audience. Thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Arjun. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you so much.
Please carry on. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shylendra. It's quite elaborate and it's very interesting. But anyway, I'll reserve my comments for the time being.
Right.
Maybe that later on I'll add up to what our bright discussants are going to talk about. We have got two discussants with us.
Yeah.
Both of them are great scholar and have been, I know their works for quite some time. Very, very provocative and extraordinary work they have been doing at their own levels. And it's a great thing that this particular program has started with two very bright scholars as a discussant. Now, I may request to begin with perhaps Dr. Anamika to take up the thread and to see what are the lessons are there for us to draw from his experiences, his deliberation, and not the policy, the state should be that one, state should be one, this one, something. No, I think something you should be very frank, you should be very, very cut in the sense if you want to be very critical, be very, very critical. If you want to really come out with some suggestion, come out with the suggestion, but something which has to be very striking. It's not like adjusting with everything, nothing of that kind. Yeah. Those days are gone. You have to say, "Dudh ka dudh, pani ka pani," and that's it. And that is something which I learned, I taught myself that way. And I'm sure that I'm not wrong, perhaps. Maybe there are places where I may go wrong, but I think that some of you who are bright scholars will never go wrong. That is what my presumption is all about. May I request Dr. Anamika to begin her comments and all that on Professor Shailendra's deliberation. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sunil. Thank you so much. I mean, it's really an honor and pleasure to listen to Professor Shylendra, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very thought-provoking and enriching discussion. And Sunil, I really liked when you initially, at the beginning of the discussion, you invoked Zizek. And I was just thinking about Zizek and like how he says that real cannot be pronounced, it manifests itself in symbols. And then we hear Professor Shylendra that how the idea of development actually is actually, it has become too real to be pronounced. It's like patriarchy. It's like the disaster of development. You can't even pronounce it. For instance, when Professor Shylendra was talking about the disempowerment, empowerment is something that is being perceived as a sacrosanct model of development and almost essential kind of a component of development. When you talk about women's development and change in rural India, you do talk about empowerment, and that is something that you don't even question it, don't even critique it. But there has been scholars like, I mean, Professor Shylendra has been talking about in his presentation, but Aradhana Sharma, long back, I think she wrote in 2008 or 10, and she talks about Mahila Samakhya. And she invokes the famous book of Ferguson, the Anti-Politics Machine, and she talks about how empowerment has actually been a very kind of disempowering experience. It has actually depoliticized a lot of women's issues. And when Professor Shylendra was talking about disempowering panchayat leaders, I'm really tempted to share our recent experience. We just completed a study with women panchayat workers in Bihar. And one of the most important finding is that the idea of leadership is, is, is so, I mean, there is an intersection of the idea of development or empowerment. There's a kind of, within the framework of neoliberal model of development, there's a concept of empowerment and development, which is definitely normative. And then you have caste, class, gender, etc., etc. And how these intersections are working, and how this flux, which is kind of the intersection of the model of development. And when you talk about model of development, let's say if you talk about empowerment, there are indicators. And through these indicators, you measure empowerment. And if a woman is independent, if she is able to commute to her or to different offices or to her constituency independently, then she is considered to be empowered. But we do not see that public transportation system is in a mess in rural India. We do not see that women are not safe. They cannot commute. So even if they depend for their minor, official work in public space, we immediately label a woman as a disempowered, unempowered woman. So the entire idea, I think, is problematic, and that is something. And one of the most, disheartening impact of this model of empowerment was that many women panchayat leaders said that we do not, we try to discourage people to take domestic violence cases to police. Now, domestic violence is an issue that we are struggling with the issue of underreporting. And here we have the people's leader, people's elected leader. But the idea of empowerment, the idea of development, the idea of leadership in rural India is so complex, and I don't know how to even pronounce it. I mean, it's really a flux, and people are actually trying to perpetuate the very conventional patriarchal model of development within the rural framework. Under the model of empowerment, actually, we are promoting patriarchy, which is basically the antithesis of this. I had one more point, Professor Shylendra. I really liked your point of the way you presented the blurring of urban-rural divide. I mean, we are living in the post-truth era, so here is a populist statement, and then you come up with your idea of the double deficit in rural India. And I have a very basic question here that, yes, we are living in the post-truth era, and I mean, even if like 60 to 65% population of India is really living in rural part of the country, we don't get to see or hear about them. And this is something that we have been hearing time and again. People like Sainath had been talking about it, that less than 5% media coverage is happening when you talk about rural India. So how will we expect a common citizen to even have a sense of the real and the concurrent challenges of rural India? Because, I mean, this is the prominent context is definitely post-truth, and people in powerful positions would be making populist statements that rural-urban divide is blurring, everything is shining, and blah, blah, blah. But how do we as academic or development professional could work for creating an environment where where we could even talk about, people have the patience and understanding to listen to Professor Shylendra and understand what actually double deficit means in the context of rural question. And I know it is a very basic question, but I think we do need to stop and think about this very basic fundamental question, because there is a wave of defaming or deglamorizing the entire discourse of development, the NGOs, the academics, the intellectual. It looks like it's a stigma to be an intellectual in this country right now. And how do you think we could even operate and speak? I'm not talking about speaking of our mind. I'm just talking about speaking about basic, essential issues of our country, as you rightly pointed out. And I think it is very important because we are going through a massive regression. Pakistan is doing better on hunger than us. On gender, we are on the 148th position. Only Pakistan and Afghanistan is behind us in Asia. Situation of human and social development indicator we'll all know very well. Overall development, GDP, etc., etc. You all are economists, you know better than me the real situation. And it was like we have a populist context, and at the same time we have the real issue, real challenges. And I really struggle with this because, the larger framework is not even allowing you to speak your mind. Not real cannot be pronounced in this context. And it has become too real to be pronounced. We are living in a surveillance era where you have to, be really cautious before even making a statement. So I really thought that your idea of double deficit is very critical. But I was just thinking that how to take it forward, how to take it to larger audience, how to, how do we work in this context and even have a, open discussion.
Right.
Thank you so much. It's very good. I really liked it. Yeah. Now, may I request? Acha, I would like to respond to Dr. Anamika's any queries or anything. Dr. Prof Shylendra.
Yeah, maybe panelists can make their comments. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, no, yeah, of course, I can. Yeah, it would be good. Yeah, yeah. Can I make comment? Yeah, hello.
Will you be doing together?
No, I can. It may be good. Quickly, I respond so that there is some very clear response is there, because otherwise.
Why not you respond right now?
Yeah, quickly. So I will respond. Right. Thanks, Dr. Anamika. Right. I know, of course, as I said at the beginning, I may have raised by the title and by my abstract certain expectations, though I have not done some rigorous work in this. So these are some tentative hypotheses I have raised, I would say, right? Yeah, so therefore I appreciate your comments, right? Because so these issues, right? Even of course when we say, right, panchayats possibly would empower women or other weaker sections. So we know, of course, how panchayats, even with the constitutional kind of by several challenges. So mere law or constitutional arrangement will not help. I fully agree. Right, I fully agree, but particularly given the intersectionality that you spoke about, and also the challenge of patriarchy, which is another. I would say I would if I would have added. I said that this is preliminary, and I want to enlarge this. Possibly, I can add gender as another area where the deficit is there, and patriarchy is another structure which right get dismantled, and therefore positing gender in the existing kind of structures does not do real justice to gender. That is one comment I fully agree and appreciate, right? And then how do we put forth this developmental deficit to the common audience, right? If that is useful and relevant, right? Yeah, of course, I would say it is a much more an analytical framework for myself to understand as to how we look at this rural question, right? Definitely for policy or for any kind of action, it cannot just remain at that level, right? It needs to move forward to much more concrete level as to how these gaps and deficits can be addressed, right? Even if gender is a deficit, to addressing that is not that easy, right? That would require much more concrete action. So therefore, my policy listing that I did, all of them would require elaboration on the practicality of and then making them kind of achievable kind of prescriptions. And I would again say that coming from Anand, with the Rural Management Institution founded by Dr. Kurian, always ask this question, right? Because Dr. Kurian, he appreciated the academicians, but he would always ask them, challenge them, right? So how will this make difference to the farmer? That would be always his question, because as a manager, he would always think from that angle, though I may put it in an sophisticated analytical way, but he would say, how would this benefit farmers? How would bring smile on his face, like that? So therefore, that challenge remains, right? So therefore, these tentative ideas I have proposed needs to be taken forward in terms of further analysis and particularly on the action front. Yeah, I close here.
Okay. Anything more? No.
No,
Okay,
that's right. No, that's right.
Okay, thank you. Now, may I request Dr. Papia to give her comments, very substantive comments. Yes.
Thank you,
Papia.
Professor Sunil Ray. Am I audible, sir? Yeah, thank you, Professor Ray, for giving this opportunity. And I really like to say, Professor Shylendra, I enjoyed your talk. It was very cohesive and it was also very comprehensive. And I think we are at a point in the development debate where we are at a crossroad where the COVID situation has put us to rethink about the various theories of development. And what I liked best about Professor Shailendra's talk is how he mentioned that there is no one size fits all in the development model. And coming from the health, being a public health kind of expert, talking in the health sector, I would say that development is always very place specific. It is very culture specific. And this COVID has raised a situation that when we are talking at development, just from the economic perspective of theories and viewpoints, we are actually not looking at a cohesive or a holistic development. For a holistic development, and again, it is my idea, and I would really appreciate for Professor Sunil Ray for encouraging us to speak our minds. I think health is a big factor in the development discourse. Because when we talk about development, whose development are we talking about? So, in that, we kind of miss out on the human capital. If we see development as an outcome, where are we investing? Are we just investing on increasing industrialization, jobs, and many other things which Professor Shailendra very beautifully brought out, that how there is reverse migration and how there has been exploitation of this rural migrants by capitalists. But if we want to look at holistic development, we have to consider the health aspect also, because there is a vicious cycle between poverty and ill health. And here again, taking from Professor Shailendra's talk, when he mentioned there's a large rural urban disparity in poverty index, in rural areas and urban areas, and the disparity is much more when we look into the SC/ST population. And of course, I'm sure if we add to the gender, it will also kind of aggravate. And our studies in Bihar, rural Bihar, has showed that on an average, the household spending of every rural household is around 10 to 20% on healthcare. And when these people, they come to their nearest cities, generally Patna, they are ready to sell their all assets just to avail of the healthcare facilities. And the corona pandemic has shown us, in the earlier phase last year, when suddenly the lockdown was announced, these migrant laborers were in a flux. They were just returning back home, and at home they not only had to deal with the non-availability of healthcare services, but also the non-accessibility of healthcare services. And here, when I talk of accessibility, the way I see accessibility is in three terms. First is that in terms of the distance they have to travel, which we call as physical accessibility. But what is more important in the development discourse is the economic accessibility. That is, are they in a position to pay for the healthcare services? And even in the recent pandemic, we have seen there is so much of hue and cry about the availability of oxygen, how there is black marketing going on. So we have to kind of concentrate on the economic accessibility. The third point of accessibility, as Professor Shailendra had mentioned, caste plays a very important role. It is social accessibility. Many times, especially in rural communities, and we are working in Bihar for almost 2 decades now in the rural areas in the health and education sector, and we have seen that caste still plays a very important role. That people who are from lower caste, they do not want to go to a healthcare provider who is from the upper caste, because there are various other social dynamics. I would not go into that because that is not what is the purview of our discussion today. But I think we should talk in terms of social accessibility, economic accessibility of resources. And one such resource, according to me, is the healthcare resources. Now, when you talk about the rural challenges of development deficit, I really enjoyed that concept, and I would like to add my 2 cents into it from the perspective of health. When we talk about developmental deficit, it is not only in terms of livelihood. Can we also look at this deficit from the healthcare sector? Because we have seen in today's world, that health as an asset, we have never realized it. We have taken it for granted until the corona struck on our face. So, irrespective of all the bad things that corona has given to our lives, we have lost many of our near and dear ones. But this is a good lesson for all of us that we have learned, that we have to treat health as an asset. And it is a place where we make the right kind of investment, coming from an economics perspective of view. And you all are economists, you will know the concept of investment and dividend. But when we try to make an investment in the health of the people as an asset, we can reap it as a better dividend, as a broader dividend that will lead to a sustainable development. Otherwise we are not talking about hollow development. We want it to be sustainable. How can we sustain it? Only when people for whom this development is meant, when they are able to enjoy the fruits of development, when they are equal participants to it. And I think these are some of the things that we can rethink as a group of academicians coming from different fields. But and as I said, and I would just conclude my remarks by saying I couldn't agree more with you, Professor Shylendra, when you say that it is not that we just take this particular model and try to fit in that case. And the example that you give of Amul, we all know about the success story of Amul, and we try to replicate it. And one of the reasons, of course, like you are in a better position than I am to evaluate it and comment on it. But seeing objectively, we see that Amul, the way it flourished and why it has come out as a very good model to us is because it was a brainchild of Dr. Kurian, as you said, but it was very much from within the community. It was not an approach that was kind of, pushed down on the people. It came from within the community. It was acceptable by the people. And I think when we talk about development, this is one important thing that we have to take into consideration to break the vicious cycle between poverty and ill health. Because if people are poverty stricken, studies have shown they have higher morbidity rate, and to overcome that morbidity rate, they actually kind of either borrow or sell their assets to access the healthcare services. And since they had some health condition, they cannot go back into the job market, and then they're out of job, and that brings them back to poverty. So in order to break this vicious cycle, to narrow down the disparity, I think if we could incorporate the concept of healthcare into the development paradigm, we can look at a very kind of cohesive development, and we can make certain changes in the development approach. Thank you so much.
Yes, Professor Shylendra, so nice. Papia, Dr. Papia Raj really has, it's very provocative. I really liked so much. And quite a few things which are very important to underline. Perhaps Professor Shylendra have noted those things and will be able to explicate his point of view, maybe able to respond immediately to some of the points that you have raised. Yes, Professor Shylendra. Professor Shylendra.
So please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Am I audible? I am audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Right. I must, thank Dr. Papia, particularly for bringing in this health dimension. Right now, I must mention, I offered a course, elective course to our PG students on COVID-19 governance and management, COVID-19 pandemic governance and management, to learn more about COVID myself than my students. Right, on this whole issue of health, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have, in fact, I have, though I have briefly mentioned there human development, but I fully understand not only in the context of COVID, but even in the normal even in the normal context, the role of health, right? So I have, in fact, as I said, that I have done evaluation of quite a few schemes. One of the schemes that I have evaluated was of NRHM, National Rural Health Mission. Even in Bihar, I had come to Bihar to conduct a study of NRHM and also other such schemes, right? And our health situation has been pathetic, and COVID has come as an X-ray, as people say. COVID has come as an X-ray to expose those pathetic situations, right? Pathetic situations. And if when I say that there is a livelihood crisis, so how I understand livelihood crisis, though I did not go into it, livelihood crisis is the result of constrained inflows for the rural households in terms of lower income, lower wages, right, exploitation, etc., and higher outflows under neoliberalism, including high health expenditure, right? Health expenditure is very high, and many of them even deny themselves the health care because of the expenditure, right? So therefore, in the livelihood crisis or the agrarian crisis that I was highlighting, so even this health is as a major issue. There are several, of course, even social expenditures like dowry or etc. also come into play, but health expenditure also come into play, and they have aggravated the livelihood crisis, right? And the one area, of course, not only health, but health and education. Of course, we know two areas COVID has badly hit, even in rural areas, is education and also non-COVID health. Non-COVID health care has also suffered like the rural education, right? So there is no gainsaying, right? I totally agree. I have never, though I might not have mentioned elaborately on the health issue, but I am totally in agreement with you, having studied NRHM, including in Bihar. And as I say that my livelihood is a more cohesive or an integrated phenomenon where it takes in even health and education and the kind of outflows they impose on the households and the kind of crisis they get into, right? Yeah, so fully well taken. And in terms of taking forward, yeah, those issues definitely can be brought out more explicitly, so that some of the arguments that I have made out under my development deficit, they become explicit and clear. Thank you, Dr. Papia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, anybody wants to raise any question, anybody who is participating, one can raise one's own voice, one can register. May I request?
We also have open.
May I request anybody is there who wants to I'm not able to see anybody.
Hello.
So if anybody,
Dr.
Upendra, yeah, Dr. Upendra. Yes.
I think
Open your camera. Yes.
Dr. Upendra, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is really a very good session we had regarding these issues in rural transformation in India. So, but I just flash back to your initial the opening remarks what difference we can make. So the question arises, what difference we can make. So that should be the central focus of the whole development discourse, what I feel. I think Professor Shylendra has very well taken the issues of livelihood and transformation and everything. I really congratulate him. But I just want to add some of the aspects as we have experience in the field level situation also. After almost 74 years of independence, again we are talking about the surplus labor, agrarian questions we have. We have the similar kind of questions, maybe the I think the old wine in a new bottle kind of situation. So really realize we are not to an extent able to really solve the problem what it should be. Despite of all facts, we have spent lot many money, lot many program has been roped. After 2000, maybe after 1998 or 2000, there are lot many decentralization schemes has been launched, lot many anti-poverty program, educational program, NRHM, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, DPEP. There are lot many, even the watershed program, and this Panchayati Raj 73rd amendment, it has got given more space after that. We have also to almost, we have covered around 18 states of the country for this reviewing this rural development programs at panchayat level. So we had been to that, we have seen that to what extent the livelihood issues has been addressed by the Gram Panchayat. That's fine. But I will not take much time. I just want to just focus on 2-3 things. As we are just looking into, it's all my view, what I just come to understand after maybe around 20-25 years of experience. What we call it development is fine. But nowadays, if we are just talking about, there are a lot many professionals are coming into it, a lot many experts, lot many the think tanks are coming for this development activities and all. But again, development, they are saying it is not happening to an extent it should be. Then who are at the fault? Why it is not happening? So my question is, is development is become a kind of business, or we can say, is development is a real a baby of the people who are at the basically the power level? So it's again a kind of question. So maybe these are the reasons why we are not reaching to the end we should be. Then the kind of we can say there are lot many development programs have been planned, executed, maybe related to livelihood. Because I was a part of Rajasthan Rural Livelihood Program, I had drafted the whole project implementation plan that was funded by World Bank in the year 2010-2011. So when I got this opportunity to draft this project implementation plan, I asked the director कि आप लोग क्यों बनवा रहे हो, क्योंकि आप लोग तो इसको कर नहीं पाओगे काम. बोले नहीं, गरीबी हम सर जो भी आपने पिछला किया, आप लोगों ने जो किया, तो मुझे नहीं लगता है कि आप इसको चला पाओगे, तो आप इसको क्यों चला रहे हो. बोले नहीं, आपको पैसा मिलेगा, आप इसको चला लो. तो मतलब आप इसको बना दो, चलाना नहीं चलाना तो हमारे हाथ में है. So my question is, the people who are sitting, who are in charge of the whole development process, how the person or the power who is lying with the people who are holding the whole development discourse or the development system, how that can be made a kind of a democratic one. Because now what is happening, that is all acting, they are acting based on the resources they have, the money they have been granted, the line of action has been suggested by any donor agency. They never see whether it is practical or it is not practical. So those are the issues. We are again after the end of the program, we come to know कि नहीं इसमें हुआ नहीं, जो मुझे करना चाहिए था वो नहीं हुआ. So those kind of thing I just want to just flag. Then the kind of dose, कहते हैं किसी मरीज को आपको ठीक करना है तो you should have a kind of dose given to him or her. So we are not able to, the development professionals are not able to plan that what dose, how much dose we are supposed to give them, and the kind of support system. Ultimately, the whole investment, what we are making to the whole development program, what support system we are just working for a result only. कि हम लोग ये करेंगे तो ये हो जाएगा, ये changes होगा, ये impact आएगा. We never put our things कि we should create a system जो कि system should flow in a, मतलब work in a self-sustainable way, and the program should be continued. So these are the issue I flag. Then again, the every time we are talking, the all development programs talking about the democratic model, but when you look into it very intensively, you will find the whole system is autocratic. So that could also be a reason we may accept or don't accept, but this is the reality. And because we are thinking, we are just discussing on the way, what is happening, why not it is happening, what can be done so that the whole effort can be take better shape. So these are the things. Again, because nowadays development become a kind of a fashion. Sir, I had been to your place. I had been to in Anand in the March 2020-21, just to evaluate one program related to national food security. And I thought it was really a very good district and very good program. But I have also moved to the villages and all. But again, as you are also aware, in India, we have almost 75 crores of the people who supposed to get the benefit of national food security, the subsidized ration they should get. But again, I could say, again, there is a list of at least 20 to 30% of people who really want they should be roped into the national food security scheme so that they can get subsidized wheat and rice. But my question is, when we are talking about lot many anti-poverty programs, lot many different programs, suppose the employment, skill and all, but still day by day, because I had been to many, at least 6-7 states of the country, traveled across the villages and all. Just see again, the people who are the poorest, they are the needy, they are again out of the whole program, they are not getting any benefit, and the people who are above them, they are getting the benefit. So ultimately, the design of the development program, certainly it is very good, but the looking to the execution, it needs to be taken care of. So who is going to see that? Who is going to monitor that? Why it is not happening? Again, the whole system is there. As initial Professor Ray told, we can't make person happy. So what is happening? The whole development discourse process, what we are doing, we just making people happy. हमारे बॉस को हम खुश रखना चाहते हैं कि कोई सेक्रेटरी है वो हमको खराब नहीं बोले. सर इस तरह की बात होती है. I had been to, you might be aware, one director of yours, national food security, जो गुजरात में देखते हैं, Mr. Dolakia, Tushar Dolakia, he was there. He was with me for two days. We had been to your place. We have covered some places. तो I think कि वही होता है कि कोई खराब चीजें नहीं निकल के आ जाएं, जिससे कि शायद हमको कोई परेशानी हो जाए. तो एंड वी जस्ट वांट टू कि हम उनको खुश करने में, तो सर ये इस तरह की व्हाट आई फील कि वी नीड टू रियली चेंज कि डेवलपमेंट को अगर हम देखना चाहते हैं तो व्हाट्स की प्रोसेस. ओके, सो दीज आर द थिंग्स. So these are the things I just want to flag. Thank you, sir, given me opportunity.
Thank you so much. Dr. Upen has a very rich experience in doing research in different areas for last 25, 30 years or so. So some of the experiences that he has shared with us is something very important for us to keep those in mind, the learning experiences. So I thank you so much, Dr. Upen, for sharing your experiences and very contributory. Professor Shylendra may be able to briefly react to what to respond to his queries.
Dr. Upendra, yes, I appreciate the comments that you made, and we are all working in the same domain, same field. So having seen the working of rural development programs, right, a variety of them, right, and of course I also must have evaluated, I don't know, at least some 25 programs at least I must have since my PhD days, if I take starting with IRDP, so to NRLM now, only just couple of days I published a paper on NRLM also. so many programs we have all evaluated, and we know how these programs get conceived, how they get implemented, and all the kind of challenges, including the issue of professionals, role of professionals or bureaucrats, right, in these programs, right. I thank you for raising this point, right. And again, I must say that coming from Anand again, I said that why IRMA was created. Dr. Korean, who wanted to implement this Operation Flood, which is a replication of Amul model elsewhere, he did not want bureaucrats to work with this system. He is of the view that bureaucracy, the general bureaucracy, is not fit to implement any specialized programs. They are there just to exercise their power, right, and get privileges. They are not really concerned with the neither with the focus of the program or the area, nor they have any concern for the target group. They are there merely as bureaucrats doing an instrumental task, instrumental role of maybe moving files, meeting numbers, etc. Right? So he was convinced that bureaucracy is not fit to implement developmental programs. So therefore, he conceived this idea of rural managers based on his own experience of Amul, where committed professionals or professionals with integrity who understand the role, who understand the need of the farmers, who understand the sector, right? It's not that somebody is working in nuclear physics and tomorrow he is in the women and child welfare department. No. A professional who knows, if it is agricultural sector, that professional should know agricultural sector and its needs and the needs of the farmers. If someone is working in the area of women and gender empowerment, he must understand what is this area, and he must involve himself, he or she must involve himself and commit himself, right? So therefore he conceived this idea of rural manager who is a committed professional, who understand the sector, who understand the needs of the farmers, right, and who has the necessary integrity, and he is not an vested interest there.
Okay. No,
yeah, so therefore that is this whole idea. So therefore this idea in the entire sector of program conception, implementation, this role of professionals has not been conceived. Just as the corporates emphasize on the managers, even rural development programs needs committed professionals. Only then they can work. Therefore, I will end with
you made your point.
Only one point.
There are other people who are waiting.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Okay. I'll come back to it later.
Yeah. Sir, we have three people here.
Okay.
I also wanted to add about China and other experience, but we have Professor Dinesh Marothia, sir. Okay. And also have Dr. Asha Shoma Shekhar ma'am. And we also have Chandrasekhar Singhal.
Okay.
Dr. Chandrasekhar Singhal. I will request all of you to kindly be very brief. Shall we start with Professor Marothia? Sir has also written good words about Shylendra sir over email. Sir, why don't you yourself?
Good.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Oh, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Please.
Yeah, yes, Professor. Hello.
Okay, hi. My compliments to Shylendra for such a wonderful presentation and also clarifying the issues raised by the discussant and other friends. I would only take 30-40 seconds. I would say, just to supplement Professor Shylendra, that if we want to stop reverse migration forever, let us revive the well-tested, sustainable, diversified agriculture and allied sector portfolio, particularly in central India, where reverse migration occurred most. And I can justify this statement because we are also doing, and Shylendra was with us when I was.
Okay. Yes.
Sir, we have lost him. Shall we? Yes, we.
Yeah, others can make comments and then I'll come back quickly together. Yeah, Professor Ray also can. Yeah.
Arjun,
Yes.
I can see.
Thank you very much for giving me the time. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Right. So, Dr. Chandra Shekhar, would you like to? Anamika ma'am, you were saying anything?
No, I was just saying there are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yes.
Dr. Leela has a question, then Anjana has a question.
We are getting
So
Dr. Leela
that's
also here.
exactly.
Yes. Dr. Chandrasekhar, would you like to ask?
Yeah.
Have
Yes, please.
Chandrasekhar.
Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It is a wonderful experience, but my comment is like this. I was working in National Institute of Rural Development for 30 years and got some experience at the ground level. My suggestion is to this group is that lot more has changed actually in implementation of development program. It is not like the similar as it was 30 years back. Now there are schemes like GPDP, village plan preparation, and then we have a social audit. We have this, of course, wage employment program, and there have been drastic changes in these programs. The women empowerment, even the livelihood program also is not similar as it was 10 years back. So lot more has changed, and there is focus on empowerment at local level. So my suggestion is to academicians is to go and see success stories and appreciate wherever it is appreciable, and try to make government also understand the success of this program. So this much I want to say. Even in Panchayati Raj also, local self-government also, there has been lot of changes has been there. Lot of even money has been there. So it is not as it was earlier. But of course, there is a scope for improvement in local self-government. But this need to be appreciated also, so that it is acceptable to government. Another issue I wanted to tell is that there is some focus and more this money need to be allocated for education and health, and particularly the nutrition aspect, as some of you have also mentioned. So that also we can emphasize in our suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me for this.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Asha Somashekhar, would you like to add quickly? You have to unmute yourself. No. Okay, sir, Professor Shylendra, why don't you answer both the questions?
You had question, no? Arjun, you can briefly ask whatever. You wanted to ask a question, you said.
Sir, I just wanted to ask that how China has been able to do it in last 2-3 decades.
Okay.
And for their local economic development and for their rural transformation, the model they have is called semi-urban, suburban model, which, but they have a different land thing. But how do you see in last 2 decades the development which has occurred vis-a-vis which has not occurred in India?
Yes.
As Dr. Upendra was saying that a lot of model and everything is going, and Chandra sir was also highlighting the same.
Yes. Right. Yeah, very quickly. Yes. So thanks, Dr. Marotia, for the question on reverse migration. I just only brought out only to start off my presentation. So, of course, I have studied migration of the general kind, right? The cyclical migration. I have seen, of course, why it happens, what is its nature, etc. Right? So, there I have also made argument that migration needs to be reversed like that. If I say that is of the distress kind, I am saying reversal of the distress migration. Right, of course, I am also migrant here in Anand, right? Maybe many of us are migrants, right? That is a different kind of a migration. But this distress migration, right, and the kind of trap they fall into and the kind of exploitation. So if rural development and developmental interventions in rural areas improve, they to a significant extent bring down distress migration, especially by women, right? And that improves their bargaining position even as migrants. So that is what I meant, right? Migration in general, right? We are all migrants. So the reverse migration also of last year is mainly consisted of those who are distressed migrants, and that is what was my comment when I started off with that example. Okay, Dr. Chandra Shekhar Singhal's comment that yes, lot many programs are there. They have changed. Success stories need to be captured. Yes, I was part of a major independent assessment of Panchayat Raj in India for Government of India. We have recorded many success stories of the role of panchayats, right? Like that. So when, of course, when I was saying that panchayats are struggling, it is at a general level. There may be many examples, many individual leaders, panchayats, which are all playing some useful role. And they stand like Amul. So there are also many panchayats which are working quite successfully. So when I say that we need to deepen democracy, so we need to also learn from those success stories. So I agree. Myself has recorded some of them, right? And they are also important. Why they work, why they don't work in certain cases, right? So in fact, in Chhattisgarh, as part of that working chairperson of that working group, we looked at panchayats and other institutions also. Some of the success stories also we did document. Okay, and of course, Dr. Arjun's question as to how China has done. Of course, there are a lot of studies and literature also, but at least 2 or 3 points which needs to be taken note of. One, of course, is the whole issue of land in China, right? From the beginning, also, land has been collectivized, or it has been a kind of a common property, unlike us here, right? So that initially and subsequently had given access to land, food security to a significant extent, though they faced a major famine, but food security has been addressed at the rural level because of the access to land and also some of the food security and social security programs. Of course, in terms of surplus labor, China did a very calibrated shift, right? Nearly 400 million or so, that much of rural labor, they did that in a very calibrated way. So that is not possible in the Indian context, because like we know this whole exodus, right? Migrants going here and they return, coming back, etc. But there they controlled it, they planned it. So they planned as to what kind of investment is required, how much. So it was highly planned exercise which enabled them to shift some significant proportion of surplus labor. Those rural remains as a major chunk in China. So this whole rural question, China has resolved to a significant extent, but still there is some significant level of rural challenges that still needs to be addressed. But definitely much better than, and of a much higher scale than India that they did. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I think I have addressed all the questions that came to me.
There are only now 2-3 questions. Sunil sir, should I just read them out?
You go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So Leela ma'am has asked one question, and why do you call agrarian economy and farm labor as informal? How can we formalize this economy so that it can be studied better? and farm labor gets their right. How can we change this? Just like Amul was able to. Why cannot they be salaried and guaranteed for 1 year, continuing from the last question? I think, sir, it's a very pertinent question. And I would ask a policy question in your view. What do you think? We are giving 6,000 rupees in 3 tranches, 2,000, 2,000, the scheme called as PM Kisan.
Yeah.
And we have Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana for its extended Manrega.
Yeah.
And so these are 2 welfare schemes which you have, some amount of money we are giving. And since we are also talking migrant and, social distancing, so what I think ma'am is trying to ask, that some kind of universal basic income, or do you think the PM Kisan needs to be extended to non-agricultural household? Or how do we somehow universalize and also mitigate any kind of income or livelihood losses? So are we moving in that direction? Will that be sort of socialism or the structure we are looking forward to? But then how will we integrate health, education and other things? Another question we have is from Anjana Banerjee ma'am. It is also very pertinent question. Sir, do we have to chart any strategy for tourism development for rural areas after the pandemic, while keeping in mind the ecological consideration? And since we all are sitting at home, it is the ecological services and ecosystem restoration, these things is coming too much on people's mind. So these are 2, I think, very pertinent question which has come. I would like to say that more of economic and social security and social policy type of questions we have. We have Kishloy Banerjee sir, who has been raising his hand. You are in panel. Would you like to just chip in? Kishloy ji, you are in panel. You have to unmute yourself. No problem. Sir, would you like to just take these 2 questions?
Right. Yeah. Quickly, Dr. Lila's question on, right, so this whole issue of how do we convert agriculture into a formal sector, something like that, right? So it's an informal sector, right? So like, of course, in the 70s and 80s, people used to talk of the issue of agriculture should become an industry, like that people used to talk, right? That used to be the kind of argument. Yeah. So now, of course, when we say here informal, right? Of course, one is the question of laborers. Another, of course, is the question of the peasants, right? So peasants, of course, agriculture, they're all self-employed, right? So they are not a part of any organization or any such formal structure. So what we are talking of now, even including government, when they say they will form FPOs, etc., or collectivization, even at Anand, right, these collectives of farmers, is some kind of a cooperativization or collectivization of the farmers, so that they have some organizational strength, right? Because otherwise, if they are individuals, so they are on their own, they are self-employed, right? They sometimes even self-exploit themselves. So they are not able to bargain in the market for inputs or for outputs, better prices. So what is required is, whether we call it as formalization or whatever, collectivization and organizing the farmers, so that particularly small and marginal farmers who are struggling now in every sense, right? And that is what would be required. And then, of course, in terms of the laborers, right? In terms of the laborers, right? So laborers, of course, if they are migrant laborers or other kinds of laborers, so we know that all the laws, etc., that exist, they are just on paper, right? So they are just not working. And now with all the kinds of amendments that the governments have made recently in terms of labor code, etc., now laborers, both industrial labor and other kinds of laborers, now are again in a highly disadvantageous position. So therefore, the labor unions and such organization, definitely they also need to organize and ensure that their working conditions, living conditions, bargaining strengths are improved. Otherwise, so this whatever we say, reserve army, surplus labor, etc., so that has become the major source of surplus extraction now. And with COVID, etc., costs going up, so one major area where all the industry, all the organization, all the business are looking towards profit maximization is cutting wages, cutting on the labor, right? So therefore, even otherwise, with or without COVID, now therefore even organization of labor is an important issue. Yes, basic income, right, at this stage of our development, with and this level of growth and development, right, and we are still unable to address some of the basic needs, right, be it food security, be it basic education, be it basic health, etc., right? So then as I said that so we are not definitely doing justice as a welfare state or the goals of social justice. So we talk in terms of all this, becoming superpower, etc. No, we should be thinking in terms of forever at least end these basic gaps, right, in all these basic needs. And if that requires, and that would end much of the crisis also, right? So this basic income for the farmer 6,000, in that sense, which was introduced by many state governments, which has been therefore taken over by the center, right? So given the crisis, farmers crisis, given that MSP does not reach many farmers, this was a good scheme because it was coming closer to meeting all the farmers. But yes, so therefore all such unorganized sector people must have some basic support so that they don't get into distress and get themselves exploited, right? So that is the minimum as a welfare state we can be doing, and we can afford to do this. And in my view, it will not cost too much of our, definitely not too much of our national income, and it's worth doing it.
That's very good. Anybody, anything else?
Yeah, this question of a strategy for tourism, right, rural tourism, etc. So last year I did a training
Very brief. Please be brief.
Yeah, I did a training on rural tourism, right? Yeah, it's a challenge now with COVID. It is not that easy. So this rural tourism model, which was working earlier pre-COVID, now will collapse. So we may have to rethink on the this rural tourism model, because people are just afraid of, in general, tourism has suffered. So therefore we may have to wait or entirely recalibrate once the COVID is over. There is no way we can work out on that now, right now. So we may just have to wait and then come up with some kind of a new model which may work.
Good.
Yes, I am done. Thank you all for the questions and your patient listening, and thanks for the opportunity.
Sunil, sir, over to you.
Yes, shall I conclude now?
Yes. Okay.
My job is now. Let me tell you very briefly some of the things which I felt very much necessary for me to bring before you. Professor Shylendra, I'm certainly happy, but would have been happier.
Yeah.
Would have been happier had you been able to do a little more exercise to go further.
Yeah.
My expectation is something much more than what you have done over here.
Yeah.
The reason is that there are 2-3 reasons. One, first of all, let me start with there are many things to praise about. No dispute about it. But people have already taken note of those things.
Yeah.
But some of the points which have not been taken note of, I would dare to speak before you.
Sure.
You lost your focus. You don't have focus.
Yeah.
You have got every aspect of it, and everything, each chapter. If there are 20 problems, 20 chapters can be prepared out of that.
Yeah.
And you go on speaking. And that we have been hearing for last 25, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
It is no end. Will you stop that? Number one. Number two is that, this analytical framework that we talk about.
Yeah.
The basically indicators.
Yeah.
Based on certain indicators, but indicators one part of the analysis. From there you have to take, what is the analysis is missing.
Yeah.
It's an assertion based on certain parameters.
Yes.
Certain indicators. You said this, and therefore it is this. I think this is something which is more speculative.
Yeah.
More self-assertive than what it is. So in other words, what I'm trying to say that this analysis to be added.
Yes.
And precisely, this particular forum becomes very relevant.
Yes.
What is the purpose of this forum? Again, to put it very statistically,
Yeah.
challenging the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Challenging the fundamentals, the basic objective of this forum.
Yeah.
Now, question is that, have I been able to challenge it?
Yeah.
Now, if I ask Professor Shylendra, he has been peripheral in his argument. He is not central, not at all. He is not touching the center. He is capable. He is much capable than any one of us, but he has not done that job.
Yeah.
He has not done justice to himself. He has to really touch the central nerve of the argument, the problem. Question is there now. For example, let me tell you, first point. Why did you mention the system structure? You were all around talking about what for 25 years people have been speaking about. This is the problem, this is the problem, that is the problem, that is the problem. If this happened, it is nothing but the same paradigm. And then criticizing, going away from the paradigm, you are, as I said in the beginning, anomalies ko theek karna hai. That is the kind of normal science that we talked about. I do not want to see you as a normal scientist. I want to see you to challenge the fundamentalists, a paradigm shift. And where is that kind of a inputs that I could get from you? No, nothing. Now here, I just for your reference, Medo and Medo, the limits to growth in 1972. They wrote just 2 lines I directed for your understanding. For we recommend the search for facts, not by random, but be governed by greatly increased emphasis on establishing system structure. The behavior of all complicated social systems is primarily determined by the web of physical, biological, psychological, and economic relationships that binds together any human population, its natural environment, its economic activity, until the underlying structure of our social system. Now, underlying structure of the social system needs to be studied. We have not done at all. It is all peripheral. It is upar ho raha hai. Underlying structure we have not. And unless you do this underlying structure analysis, you cannot be able to capturing fundamentals. You will not be able to really challenge the fundamentals.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the majority of us, most of the academicians are shy of hitting hard the kind of structure. Now you talk about Ambedkar's nahi hua, inequality, caste distribution. My question is that why the hell did not happen for just Upendra for 45 years, 75 years independence we have? Nothing has happened. Question is that as he asked question, he said that you asked this question, why didn't it happen? Why is it happen? Why is it that inequality is there? Why is it that no participation in many panchayats is not taking place? Why? It is the structural discrimination. This is the one issue that needs to be done. Second, the third point is that we never talked about politics and this fractured democracy that we have now. We have inherited from the British of the fractured democracy. Now the politics. How is it that you completely kept yourselves, your analysis from the politics? How is the independent variable? Is political science, politics is the independent variable? We are shy of it. We do not want to relate the event with the politics that's going on. And that politics determines everything. Politics determines everything. Whether 6,000 rupiah milega ki 5,000 rupiah milega, that is being decided by the politicians, by the politics. I won't say politician, politics, the culture, the politics, and the dominant politics. And that is something which you cannot exclude. So, the question is that when you really do have a kind of analytical framework, I think that one may expect it. Fundamentally, if you want to challenge, you need to really relate the politics or the fractured democracy that you have. The democracy is fractured. First of all, let us establish the fact whether the democracy is fractured or not. If the fractured democracy, why it is fractured? Who is responsible to make it fractured? You know, those are the basic questions which I do not have an answer. And many people do not have answer.
Yes.
And I think we want somebody, some scholar like you should enlighten us to say that, well, it is not fractured. It is a good democracy. We are unable to implement. The question is, why is it Why is it not possible for us to implement? What makes us not to implement? Those questions comes. Why the caste discrimination still continue? Why it is possible? That's something which is. Now another question is that, let me tell you, you are doing a fantastic work on this labor movement, the farmers movement and all that, I know. Now that you talked about Lewisian turn, Lewisian turn. Now, may I ask you a provocative question? Rather, I would like to instigate you, provoke you to think about what is the connection between the Lewisian thing and farm law. Have you ever thought? The farm laws has some contact with the Lewisian model of change, surplus labor absorption. There is a connectivity between the two. Now, is there an exploration of that kind of thing? That is necessary for us to really reflect on that content. And that will take you to the fundamentals. That will take you to challenge the fundamentals. Yes. I think that is very important for us to look at. In other words, we need to spread our understanding, views and everything to see that it is possible to capture. And then you talk about, once you try to do that one, because as you said very rightly, urban-rural divide. Yes, it is not possible. It is already there. They are the blood they want to make it. But the question is a structural problem. Now this Lewisian model, Lewisian development, and this urban was being created, all being what is called imitation of the development pattern of the West that everybody knows. And I have been talking about for the last 25 years or so. So I'm bored of it. The question is that, fine, now how to break it? The one which is being spoken, fine, all being done, how to break it up, how to stop it. Is it possible for us, Shylendra, to provide a model for that one? This is the way it has to be redressed. And no repairing business. If you go on repairing system, aisa karna padega, bus gone. And now blah, 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 people will keep lying. Is the slip and on it. Now it has to be hard hitting and say that, well, this is how this will. That is what my feeling is, not feeling is all about. And then another question that I would like to discuss with you, and then we'll stop here, that you talk about Amul model. Okay, I have no dispute about it. Bahut acha baat hai. Now this is the story I have been hearing for last again for 1988 when I visited. I mean till today I have been hearing Amul model. Now may I ask you that why Amul model is not implemented elsewhere in other areas? It's so sanctified, it's so great model. It's all about. No doubt, as far as I understand, it's a great. No question, no discussion. But why is it not being taken to the other respect to other levels of activities? If it is so successful, who is to be blamed for that? Is the system? Is the politician? They are not able to get out of it. Let us ask this question. Again, from there also you can get some fundamentals. The who is responsible for this kind of thing? Now, question that ideal model, go on beating the drum. I think those days are gone. Let us stop it. Everybody knows it is the ideal model. Let us not talk about Korean model, this and that. All knows. I have done quite a bit of work on that. But question is that why it is not implicated, number one. Or is it another thing also? No knowledge is something which is very fixed. Karl Popper, he must be knowing about it. Long ago he wrote, whom I really like so much, I quoted many places. He said that no research, no idea, no understanding is something in understanding, or research or thesis is something which is correct, which if it is not to be criticized, it has to be criticized. If it has the element of being criticized, then it is true. And one has to go. It means that if the science, if you come out from the Newtonian physics to what is called Einstein's relativity, is something coming out from that kind of thing. And in the physical world, there are many innovations that have taken place which really defy the earlier thesis. Here we still, like the colonial past, like economics which is being taught in 1800 century, today also in the university is being same thing being taught as the sacrosanct, as something which is valid laws of economics. इससे बुरा बात क्या हो सकता है? Have we ever asked this question? These laws which are being already developed by the British economics, by looking at the development of capitalism in Britain, these are the things which has been taught us. Even now we are teaching the same thing to us. What is that? Where do you stand? Now where? Nowhere, because we are not asking this question. So therefore, I think it's necessary for us to really know, even that Amul project, which is very important for us to know. Amul project, well, is it something the optimum? Can there be any improvement further? I'm asking Professor Shylendra about this one.
Yeah,
Can there be no further? There can be. What is that improvement? If you say it cannot be improved further, I think it's a dead case.
yeah.
Not a single situation in the world which is evolving can ever be stagnant and ever be true for years, for generations. It has to change. And therefore, from that point of view, that is, if it is not there to be changed, it is a dead case. It is not to be replicated at all. And if there is an improvement of scope for improvement, please tell us, tell the world, this is the improvement, this highlight. My last point is that, talk about which Anamika and there are other participants, they talked about so nicely that what is called idea of development. Even Dr. Papia and all that. Idea of development. Now, idea of development, let us not get too much into it. Who said what? Oh, Ambedkar, Mahatma Gandhi, oh, John Stuart Mill, and हजारों लोगों को कोट करके अरे भाई छोड़ो, तुम क्या कह रहे हैं बताओ सीधे बात. वो सब छोड़ो, तो आप क्या कह रहे हैं? What is that you talk about development? Tell us very frankly, honestly, and clearly with simplistic terms. Let us not get too much into complications. What do you mean by development? Now, there are two strands of thought, very simplistic. One which I have developed is cohesion. Cohesiveness is the method and approach. And that is against individualism. You know, the individualism has got the tradition from the Newtonian physics. Atomics. Individual is an atom. Each individual is an atom. And therefore independent of each other. And that's something which influences the economic world, which influencing even now today also. All of this one. And the question of any development thing that you think about, is it individual or fragmented kind of thing or cohesive kind of thing? That is one thing. And here, I talk about cohesive, we largely borrowed from this. Einstein's first theory of relativity, whereas at the subatomic level, you find this neutron, proton, and electron, they are out of what is called entangled. Theory of entanglement, quantum physics, the theory of entanglement, they are entangled. And therefore, this entanglement theory gives you this what is called social optimum, quantum theory, social quantum theory. You must be knowing about the social quantum theory. And social quantum people in the West, some people have been working on the social quantum theory. I am presently working on the social quantum theory. The social quantum theory comes from this basically quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement talks about the integration of the people. Integration of the people. Amal is nothing, what is called a very simplistic example of the quantum entanglement of a different kind. Altogether is got institutionalized. Now here, you need to really explain in your thesis, in your presentation, when you talk about the fundamentals, you need to really see whether it's different from methodological individualism or any development is individual-oriented, fragmented, or a cohesive manner. And if it's cohesive, what the people to develop a cohesion among themselves together. Because this is something which cohesiveness, when you talk about, it has a what is called solid backing from an Einstein theory of relativity, solid backing from an individual at the subatomic level, not atom like Newtonian physics. They're individual, independent. They are not individuals or independent. They are neutron, proton, electron. They are all what is called entangled with each other. And since they are entangled with each other, therefore they should be together. Therefore, the approach should be what? Again, the question is to Professor Shylendra. What is that you talk about? I'm sorry, and I must thank every participant, every one of you to make a very, very important, very insightful comments. But again, let me request, let me tell you and tell myself also that each and every one of us, it is the forum which Dr. Arjun has created. It is something. It is not same thing to be repeated. I don't think so. No, not at all. You need to make a point. You need to make a point, need to make a statement, very solid statement that provokes intellectually everybody. That is something that makes me to think. And if it makes me to, there is nothing but bridging the gap. I think that's enough is enough. Beyond that, you have to go. And some scholars like you were capable of doing this one. So I would like to pursue, excel yourselves, never fall into the trap of something which is a reproduction cycle. The trap being enacted by what is called this, the British or the cultural imperialism. I think we must get out of it. And then we must see that we are able to generate some story, a new thing. It's not the monopoly of the West to create a knowledge base. Professor Shylendra, we need to see that creating the knowledge base is something which is our handiwork. We can do this one. It is possible for us to do it, and we have to do it. And I thank Dr. Arjun to have given this opportunity to me to be a part of this one, to see that something of this kind happens. Thank you so much. Thank you all, and thank Professor Shylendra so much for your very, very, but I would expect much more than hope I have not been harsh very much, but certainly I do appreciate your efforts to a great extent. It will be too good for us to go further, and I do expect the next presentation from you is something like that. Okay. And last but not least is the point. Now today is the trying time for us, very trying. Every one of us is vulnerable. May I ask you a question? Why it is so? Why did it happen? Let us not get political at the moment. It happened. Let me tell you very honestly. Some people have sent 1 or 2 papers I got from. They are linking up to this virus to the ecological. Many of you know ecological disturbance, ecological imbalance, biodiversity loss, and so on. In other words, linking up to the ecological disturbance. Now, I am not sure. I'm reading quite a bit on that one. Now, where do you stand now? Where do you stand? Is the ecological disturbance, destruction of the ecology, ecosystem, and the biological diversity? खत्म करना है, उसको खत्म करो. किस लिए खत्म करते हैं? Because you have the capitalist system of production. Produce more and more, profit more and more. अरे भाई सब खत्म हो जाएगा तो profit कहाँ से करेगा? I think the self-contradiction. In other words, what I'm trying to say, there is enough scope for us to address some of the basic fundamental problems. To see, let us not get ourselves into the same, गांव में देखते हैं ना, गाय चढ़ाता है, तो एक डंडा में रखता है, और उसमें क्या बोलते हैं उसको, एक धागा में बांध के वो गाय को उसी एरिया में चढ़ता है. Only within a given space will go on what is called grazing, cannot go beyond. It's tied with a particular what is called. So we are being tied and we are going grazing with the same. I think we need to really run away from, break it open and run away from this one and graze all over the UK. That is the only possibility to resolve this crisis. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Right.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Arjun.
Yes, I would also request Prof Shylendra, if you have any concluding or departing thoughts. Then
yes. Right. Yeah. No. Good. Yes. All that I would say is, see, first of all, yes, I'm thankful that I got this opportunity to share, even though, of course, I know that they were all tentative ideas, but share even the tentative ideas and engage in this discourse, which is one of the important objectives of this seminar series, right? Yes, and so, of course, I thank all the participants who have asked questions or made comments. And of course, the icing on the cake for me in terms of this learning or in terms of the gain is, of course, the comments of Professor Ray. I appreciate, right? I fully appreciate. I have no qualms in whatever he has said, right? We are here in this discourse, dialogue, right? So we are not here in any personal, right, group of personal arguments, etc. We are debating issues of concern for all of us, right? And therefore, we should be as frank and as rigorous as possible. Yes. So therefore, I take these comments of all the participants and especially of Professor Ray in that sense, right? As I had mentioned, right, this is just a sort of a hypothesis. Just for the sake of seminar, I had sort of conceived this presentation. As such, I have not done a study, but I intend to do a study. And these comments of all the participants and also of Professor Ray are important kind of inputs, critical inputs for me when I sit down to pursue this this paper or this study. So therefore, I fully appreciate and I'm fully happy of even receiving all these comments, right? So therefore, I thank the organizers for this opportunity. So it has been really enriching, right? Enriching a couple of hours of engagement with scholars who have this commitment and sincerity, right? And therefore, one can therefore, as a speaker, I can fully appreciate all of them, and appropriately internalize them and take them forward. Thank you, Arjun and team, for this.
Thank you very much, sir. And it's a quite long discussion, but rightly so. And with the energy of Professor Sunil, I will be amazed, because one cannot sit for 1.5 hours and you can see the energy. It's really brilliant, and it feels like we are alive and working as a researcher. So grateful. So let me just quickly propose a vote of thanks for this very enriching and thought-provoking discussion today in lecture by Professor M.H. Shylendra, the rural quotient issues in rural transformation in India. And this special series, the State of Development Discourses, Cohesive Development, which is chaired and moderated by, directed by Professor Shylendra, and it is organized by IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, and Center for Development Communication Institute at Jaipur. So I'm very thankful to our speaker for the day, and we look forward to learning more from the IRMA model and what the fantastic work sir, you have been doing, and look forward to learning more from your work and your recent BW paper also. We'll also try to bring the report and everything into an article form. So let me also thank our chair and moderator, and our discussants for this very important session, Dr. Papia ma'am, Dr. Priya and Dr. Upendra Singh sir. And I would also like to thank all other participants who contributed and raised important points, and those who will be looking further at YouTube and our other podcasts. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Take care, everyone. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Arjun. Thank you, Professor Ray.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for your participation. We shall meet. Shall surely meet and be in touch.
Yeah.
Sure.
Arjun and team and Professor Ray and Professor Shylendra, Priya, Papia and Upendra, everybody, all the participants. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Not able to see anybody.
Sir, it's quite late.
Sir, can you see now the video?
Yes. Yeah, all of you are so bright scholars. Yes, good that you all got involved with this one. This and later on, perhaps I may request.
An offline program, I would have offered really tea and some snacks. We all should be Atmanirbhar. So yes. Thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Arjun. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.